Okay, so get this, listeners. We are diving into 3 months of city council meetings. And let me tell you, you've given us some really interesting stuff to unpack here.
Yeah, this is going to be good.
We're talking Bainbridge Island, Washington.
Yeah.
And we've got 2 meetings just on February 13th, 2024.
Wow, busy day.
Right. One was a regular meeting open to the public, but the other was a closed-door executive session.
Intriguing.
And then to top it off, we've got another meeting on February 27th. But before we get into all of that, can you give our listeners a little background on Bainbridge Island?
Sure. For those who haven't had the pleasure of taking the ferry over, Bainbridge Island is just a short ride across the Puget Sound from Seattle. It's a really charming island community known for its natural beauty, art scene, and as we're about to find out, some pretty interesting local politics.
2 meetings in one day. February 13th must have been a long day for the Bainbridge Island City Council.
I would imagine.
Let's start with this whole executive session business. What's the deal with these closed-door meetings?
Well, legally, executive sessions allow the council members to discuss certain topics confidentially.
Okay, makes sense.
For example, the minutes from this particular meeting mention a specific Washington state law. It's RCW 42.30.111, which allows for closed sessions to discuss things like potential lawsuits or real estate deals.
So basically anything that could hurt the city financially if it were, debated out in the open.
Exactly. Transparency is obviously crucial in government, but, strategic decision-making is important too.
Sure, it's like a legal strategy session. You don't want to give your opponent your game plan. All right, that makes sense. Now, let's get to the main event. The public meeting on February 13th. Wow, this agenda is packed.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack.
Swearing in a new judge, proclamations, someone wants to save a historic building. Where do we even begin?
Well, I think the range of issues on this agenda really highlight how much local government impacts, just everyday life for people.
Absolutely.
These are the decisions that directly affect their community.
Okay, let's jump in. Something that caught my eye were the proclamations. There's one for Black History Month, which is great.
Yeah.
But I've always wondered, what's the real significance of a proclamation? I mean, is it more than a symbolic gesture?
That's a great question. Yeah, they can seem purely ceremonial, but proclamations actually reflect a city's values. By publicly declaring February Black History Month, Bainbridge Island is acknowledging the contributions and struggles of African Americans.
And not just on a national level, but within their community as well.
Right, and that resonates not just with the residents, but community groups, businesses, everyone.
So it's like a company highlighting their commitment to, say, diversity or sustainability. It's about sending a message.
You got it. And those messages can have real implications.
How so?
For example, a city might use a proclamation to kind of kick off a local initiative or secure funding, raise awareness for a specific issue.
So there's actual weight behind these proclamations.
Absolutely.
Interesting. Okay, so we've established that proclamations aren't just a formality. But then things get really interesting when we get to public comment. There's a really passionate plea to save the old police station from demolition.
Yeah, that's a classic dilemma, isn't it? Progress versus preservation. It always seems to spark a good debate.
And I bet in a place like Bainbridge Island, so much history, losing a historic building probably feels like losing a part of their identity.
Oh, absolutely. Historic buildings are more than just, bricks and mortar. They represent a community's shared past, its story.
It's where they came from.
Right. So you have this tension between the practical need for modern facilities and, growth, and then this emotional connection to the past.
And preserving what makes the place unique.
Exactly.
Speaking of heated debates, let's talk about short-term rentals.
Oh, yeah.
Those always seem to be a hot-button issue everywhere these days.
It's a topic that just seems to be everywhere.
And Bainbridge Island is no exception. I'm looking at this meeting's agenda, and it features something called Ordinance No. 2024-02.
Right.
Which I'm assuming is the city's attempt to kind of get a handle on all of this, right?
Yeah, they're trying to find that balance.
It's like they're walking a tightrope.
Between letting people rent out their homes.
And, making a little extra income.
Right, but also keeping those residential neighborhoods peaceful.
It's tough.
Yeah, and it often leads to unintended consequences.
It does. Because what seems like a simple solution on the surface, just renting out your property, it actually has all these ripple effects.
Exactly.
Like, what kind of ripple effects are we talking about here?
Well, just think about it. If more and more people are converting their homes into these short-term rentals, what happens to the availability of long-term housing?
Oh, that makes sense.
It shrinks that pool, especially when it comes to affordable housing, which is already so difficult to find.
Especially in a place like Bainbridge Island.
Exactly, a very desirable location.
Yeah. So it's not just about, like, noise complaints or property values.
It's about the bigger picture.
It's about who gets to live there.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And speaking of affordable housing, it looks like the council is exploring a few options. Item 8C on this agenda caught my eye because it mentions a potentially financially feasible project over on Winslow Way.
Interesting.
And for our listeners, Winslow Way is like the heart of downtown.
Yeah.
So what makes this project so special? What makes them so optimistic?
Well, you hit the nail on the head. One of the biggest hurdles with creating affordable housing is the cost.
Yeah, of course.
Land, construction, permits, it all just adds up so fast.
It does.
So finding a project that actually, makes financial sense
Is huge.
That's a huge win.
So what's the secret sauce with this one? Did they find some, like, treasure chest buried under City Hall or something?
If only it were that easy. No, but it does look like they might be teaming up with a private developer.
Okay, interesting.
The minutes actually mention this private partner developer. And, these public-private partnerships are becoming more and more common these days.
For tackling these kind of, like, big issues.
Exactly.
Okay, so break it down for me. How does that work? Why would a private developer want to get involved with something like affordable housing? Because there's got to be something in it for them, right?
Right. It's not purely altruistic, I'll say that. These partnerships, they often involve certain incentives, like, tax breaks for the developer, subsidies, or other financial benefits. And it's a way to make the project, worthwhile for them.
Sure.
But it also achieves those goals of providing the housing.
So it's like a win-win.
Exactly.
That's really interesting.
It's about creative solutions.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, before we get, too deep into the weeds about affordable housing,
Right.
let's move on to the next meeting, which was on February 27th. And I have to be honest, looking at this agenda,
Yeah.
some of these items, like parking, I'm not going to lie, they don't exactly scream, exciting at first glance.
I get it.
But I have a feeling you're going to tell me that even those more mundane topics
Oh, absolutely.
can be interesting.
They can reveal a lot.
Like parking. You're going to have to explain this one.
Okay, so think about it. Parking might seem, kind of boring,
It does.
but it's at the heart of how people experience a downtown.
Oh.
Businesses want lots of parking to attract those customers.
Yeah.
Residents, they have their needs, and then you have the city itself.
Trying to manage everything.
Exactly, trying to manage traffic flow and maybe even encourage things like walking or biking.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
It can get really complicated.
It does, yeah.
And item 7C on this agenda, that really highlights this perfectly.
What does it say?
The Chamber of Commerce, they're raising concerns about a lack of parking downtown.
Oh, that's so classic.
It's a tale as old as time.
Every town's got that one issue
Exactly.
that everyone gets fired up about.
Right, because it's about those competing needs,
Yeah.
Do they prioritize those pedestrian-friendly streets over rows of parking spaces?
Interesting.
Do they encourage things like carpooling or public transit?
Right, and these decisions, even if it's about something as, seemingly simple as parking,
They have a big impact.
they really shape a place's identity.
They do.
Okay, so parking officially, more interesting than I thought it would be. Now, what about this building and fire code update? That's item 7D. And I'll be honest, I kind of skimmed over this one.
Sure.
It just seemed so dry.
I get it.
Yeah.
But building and fire codes, they're more important than people realize.
Okay.
They impact every single structure.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
From houses to businesses to everything.
Okay, so we're talking about safety regulations, accessibility standards, environmental requirements.
All of that.
Wow, I had no idea.
Yeah, it's about protecting people.
That's important work.
It is. It's crucial.
Okay, so we covered parking, and it turns out it's a lot more interesting than it sounds.
Right.
But now I'm really curious about something. Remember that potentially financially feasible, affordable housing project, the one on Winslow Way.
The Wintergreen Project. Yeah, it did seem promising.
What happened with that?
Well, it popped up again on this February 27th agenda,
I'm here.
and then it's gone. Just removed.
Removed. So did they just decide affordable housing wasn't important or what?
I assure you, affordable housing is still a very important issue. It's more likely there was just, a snag somewhere,
Oh,
a
yeah.
logistical issue, a legal hurdle, something like that.
So maybe a temporary setback.
Right. And that's what makes these deep dives so fascinating, right?
It does.
We get to see all these different voices, different perspectives, but ultimately...
And it all comes down to the council.
Exactly. They have to weigh all those competing interests. They have to think about the long-term impact of their choices and, try to do what's best for the entire community.
It's a big responsibility.
Yeah.
It makes you appreciate how complex local government really is.
It is, and how those decisions, even seemingly small ones, can have a ripple effect.
They really can. Well, listeners, we've only scratched the surface today, but I hope this deep dive has given you a new perspective on your local government. These meetings, they're not just about bureaucratic jargon.
They're about real issues.
That affect real people every single day. And as you go about your day, think about this. What factors should matter most when it comes to making those tough decisions that shape your community? What do you think? That's something to think about. Until next time, this has been your deep dive into local government.